We welcome you to our continued series dealing with parenting. It's a series I've entitled Common Sense Parenting because the things that I bring up are not profoundly deep. They're just common sense. And they come straight from Scripture. And today we're going to talk about fathers. I know it's not Father's Day, but this is your Father's Day message, okay? And mothers, don't start elbowing, because next time, guess what? It'll be Mother's Day. And so we're going to talk today about the role of the father. And it's going to be based on Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Let's read this verse together in respect for God's word. Let's stand. Ephesians 6:4, together. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. The Lord add His blessing to the reading of His word. You may be seated. Fathers are important. They are one of the central elements involved in holding a nation, an economy together. Several months ago, Gary Cumberledge stood up here and read a passage or a part from Tony Evans' book, Kingdom Man, pages 22. I want to reread some of these same things because they stress the importance of fatherhood. He says this: roughly 70% of all prisoners come from fatherless homes. Approximately 80% of all rapists with anger problems come from fatherless homes. The statistics on fatherlessness outside the prison population are just as alarming. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 63% of all teen suicides occur in homes where the father was either abusive or absent. In suburbia, many families have one missing either through divorce, neglect, or overindulgence. Many fathers put their careers over their families, or they love the golf course more than they love their kids. Fatherlessness, whether it comes through outright abandonment or through more subtle forms of abandonment, leaves similar scars on those affected by it. Virtually every adult social pathology has been linked to either fatherless homes or homes with a father and/or husband who has been abusive, absent, or neglectful. Society's problems are not just society's problems. They are the church's problems. They are our problems. The consequences of society's problems reach us all and have caused our nation to now stand on the brink of economic collapse. All because of fatherhood. When fathers are absent, it causes problems. When fathers are not living up to the way they should, it causes all sorts of problems. It causes confused identities. One study done by Adams, Milner, and Schreff, entitled Fatherless Children, says, boys who grow up in father-absent homes are more likely than those in father-present homes to have trouble establishing appropriate sex roles and gender identity. Not only that, we've already mentioned criminal activity, but in one study done by a number of people, it says the likelihood that a young male will engage in criminal activity doubles if he is raised without a father and triples if he lives in a neighborhood with a high concentration of single-parent families. Not only that, in terms of aggression, in a Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology article, it says one study observed that there is a greater level of aggression in boys from mother-only homes than from boys in mother-father households. It's important that fathers be fathers, biblical fathers, and live up to the image and appropriate things that God would have them to do. It's important for our nation, for our society. Edward Gibbon, in his book, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, one of the central elements that he lists for the fall of the Roman Empire was the disintegration of the nuclear family, where the father is the father. in a nuclear family is there is a father, a mother, and children from that biological relationship. It's important because you've got to understand that children, their first impression of God comes from their dad. We call God who? Our Father in heaven. And therefore, this image that we present to our children greatly impacts their concept of God. If the father is absent or the father is abusive, what are a child's first images of God? They see God as absent and abusive. What we want to do today is look at this issue of fatherhood, and specifically the role of the father in the family in his relationship to the other people in the family. Some of the things that I say, you will immediately say, this is repetition. That's okay. Repetition is the key to learning. They also say that great men repeat themselves, repeat themselves, repeat themselves. You might say that, oh, well, you're just talking to dad so we moms can tune out. No. The things that I'm saying apply to every relationship. Father, mother, mentors, disciplers. The same sort of things apply in any relationship where there is authority and training going on. So it applies to all. Let's talk about the role of the father. Let's talk first about his role in regard to the family overall. What is his responsibility? His responsibility is to lead as a spiritual example. The father is the one who sets the tone. We talked about that previously, I know, from Deuteronomy 6:6. And these words which I command thee today shall be in your heart. The father is the one who sets the tone. The power of example cannot be over-exemplified. It can't be overstated. What we have to understand is that dads, your kids look up to you and they're going to follow your example. Be it positive or be it negative, you're going to influence your children. You cannot say to your children, do as I say, and you don't do it. You've got to do what you tell them to do because your children are going to follow you in those things. It's not just the concept of parenting in which the parent sets an environment. It's an environment in which your kids are looking at you and all that you're doing, including the mistakes that you make. And do you make mistakes, dads? Nod your heads this way. We all make mistakes. Your kids are going to learn from you how to deal with their mistakes. If you stand up, admit them, and change, guess what their tendency will be? The same thing. And so they learn from our example. And we need to learn to ask what type of questions to ask ourselves in regard to this. We ask ourselves, how can I expect my children to do that which I don't? How can you tell your kids to have devotions and yet you never have one? How can you tell your children to go to church and you don't go? Can you tell your children don't lie and yet they see you lying all the time? How can we ask them to have a personal relationship with God when we don't have a personal relationship with God? How can we tell our children to experience God in a day-by-day relationship and we don't have that experience with God? Dads, how can you tell your boys to respect women when you don't respect your wife and you treat her inappropriately? Those are the sort of questions we have to ask that point out the example that we must be in life. Our relationship with our family is that of example. We also have to look at the relationship that dads have with their children's mother. In regard to the children's mother, it is the dad's responsibility, the father's responsibility, to love her. This develops emotional security within the family. When a child looks up to their father and sees their father loving that woman who is their mother, it develops security in them. And it's the same security they project from God the Father onto themselves. It develops an absolute security. That's why it's important for us men to ask ourselves the question, to look at that woman who is beside us and say, do I want to be married to this woman 10 years from now? If you do, what are you going to do to keep her between now and then? It's our responsibility. You know, we talk about divorce. I talk about it too much. And if you've been divorced, you may think I'm picking on you. I'm not. Please understand we love you and care for you. But we want you to be aware of what happens when divorce is present. Divorce is evident everywhere. It's evident here in the church. It's evidence throughout America. You know, more and more we see more and more. And there are many problems that come because of divorce. There was one study done by Paul Amato and Kelly and Emery done in 2003. They listed 6 different things that they said are evident and prevalent when divorce occurs. They say that these 6 things include parental loss. A child experiences great trauma in their life when they lose a parent, even if it's just part-time. They suffer economic loss, and I don't care how much money you got, it impacts you when divorce occurs, and it impacts the children. There's more stress in life. There's more people involved, especially where remarriage is involved. And suddenly it's not a relationship between 4 people, it's a relationship between these 4 and then the additional people that are brought in, and it just multiplies stress. And then the child is impacted by poor parental adjustment. When the parents can't adjust emotionally, think of what happens to the children. It upsets them even more. And then there's the lack of parental competence. How does one parent fulfill the roles of 2 people? A father, a mother, mother, father. And many people are not prepared to raise their children and lack the competency to do it alone. And then there's the exposure to conflict between parents. I mean, what do the kids think when they see their mom, their dad, acting like a couple of 2-year-olds throwing tantrums at each other? What does that teach them? And the emotional stress that it brings in their lives. Men, we need to love the mother of our children. Why? In 1 Peter 4:8 it says, love covers a multitude of sins. You truly love that other person. Then what happens is we're able to overlook the flaws. When you're truly in love and when you truly love, then it doesn't make a difference that the other person made a mistake. It doesn't, because we love them, we care for them. Think of what this conveys to a child. When a mother makes a mistake and dad doesn't get mad and throw things or yell, but instead accepts and loves and forgives. Because that's the epitome of love, is forgiveness. Think of what it does to them as they relate to their spiritual father, who forgives them. And that's the way they're going to relate. My Father in heaven, even though I messed up, still loves me. He's not going to yell and scream at me. He's not going to throw things at me. He accepts me. Men, love the mother of your children. and show all the evidences of love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't vaunt itself, is not easily provoked. You know all those. Love your children's mother. And then, we've talked about the family being an example. We've talked about loving the children's mother. But what about the other children in the family? In most cases, there's more than one child. What do you do? In regard to all the siblings, you need to love all your children, I pick my words carefully, equitably. What word did I not use? Equally. Why did I choose the word equitably or even-handedly? The reason I chose that is because children are different. We need to love them equitably. That is, what if your child is sports-minded and you are sports-minded? Oh, natural affinity. Whew. But what if you're sports-minded and your child is not sports-minded? There's a tendency, especially among fathers, if their son is not sports-minded, to kind of blow them off, not have anything to do with them. Loving your child equitably means love your child in the love language that they have. For some children, it means the time that you spend with them. For some children, it's the gifts that you give. Sometimes it's in touch. I think we make an equal effort to love our children, but the equitability comes in their love language and loving them in such a sense that they understand that they are loved in whatever that is, whether it's touch or time or talents or whatever it happens to be. If you don't do that, if you don't love your children equitably and they understand what that means, then you end up like a bad example I can think of. A love that was inequitable. The love of Jacob to his 12 sons. He loved them inequitably. And he showed it. Oh, you know the story. Joseph was his favorite son. So what did he do? He made him a coat of many colors. And you know what happened in the family? Since every one of them was not loved equitably and didn't sense their father's love, they became jealous of one another. And as a result, you know the conflict that came up, the selling of the brother, thinking he was dead, and years of separation and anxiety. And yeah, God was in it. God was in it. But what we need to do is eliminate the jealousy by loving not in equal manner, but in an equitable manner. Now then, what's the role of the father in regard to the individual child? What is his responsibility? In regard to the child, it's found in Ephesians 6:4. You know, that verse that we looked at earlier. The first thing that we're told in regard to this, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. The first thing that we see is something not to do. But bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. This is our responsibility to the child. What does that mean? What does it mean to not provoke your children to wrath? This is a passage that is totally and completely misunderstood by many. Some people says, dads, you're never to make your kids mad or angry. That is not what it's talking about. Because one thing I've learned about children is that I can make them mad easily by anything I do. Any decision I make will make them mad if it's not their decision. Hey, listen. It's not an issue of making them mad. As a matter of fact, things not going their way is a natural part of life. And what we have to teach our children is when things don't go our way, not to blow up and explode. Matter of fact, if my kids get mad inappropriately and there is a right and a wrong way to display anger, then discipline enters to train them not to be mad inappropriately. The word that's used here for wrath is a word it's fairly rare in the New Testament. It's a combination of two words. It's paraorge. And it's a word that develops not getting mad, it's being overly mad. I like to use the word, don't make your children resentful. And again, they can become resentful just because it's your decision and you didn't do what they want. But it's a resentment that leads to bitterness. A bitterness that in turn leads to rebellious rejection of authority. It's pushing them to rebellion. How do you do that? You do it in one of two extremes. One is excessive control. They can't do anything without your permission. You control every aspect of their life. And you never give them the freedom to make decisions and to grow and mature and become an adult. You're controlling. And when that happens, they rebel. The other extreme is excessive leniency. There are no rules. There are no standards. There are no nothing. It's whatever they want. And what happens there is the child becomes rebellious, contemptuous, because it's a parent, a father, that doesn't have limits. And children get security. Remember we talked about that? From the limits that we give them. We have a tendency, guys, to do more of the pushing, controlling. And we have to be careful that we do not exceed it. Instead, we keep things in balance, not excessively controlling, not excessively lenient. Instead, we keep them going in the right direction. Additionally, not only do we not, that's the negative aspect, provoke our children to wrath, but then there's the positive aspect of it. Feed them with nurture and admonition. There's three things I want to point out. This word feed, I choose it carefully. Because doing a careful word study, the word there is not bring them up, it's feed them. This is the exact same word that is used in Ephesians 5:29, where it says, no man hates his flesh, but, here's the word, feeds it, nourishes it, and takes care of it. The same word is used here. It's the idea of shepherding. It's the positive mentality of not just putting limits, but giving them something. Giving them something positive to hang on to. Meeting the needs that they have. That's what a shepherd does. He feeds the sheep. You feed your family. You meet their needs. Some of you dads have girls. Wonderful. Girls are wonderful things. And you know what your daughter needs as she grows up? She needs the attention and affection of her dad. And dads, you need to give it to them. If you don't give it to them, there's some stinking teenage boy out there that will. And therefore, it's your responsibility. There'll be a time in her life in which God calls a guy to meet those needs that she has. But until that time, dads, appropriately show your daughter affection. Give it to them. Dads, if your child needs your time, give it to them. If they need your attention, give it to them. Feed them. Feed them with your love. That's your responsibility. Additionally, we feed them with two things. Nurture. Now, guys react to this because women are the nurturers. It's the woman who naturally knows how to nurture the child. I don't argue the fact that women have a tendency to be better nurturers than guys, okay? Yeah, it's inherent in their nature. But who is this command given by God to? Guys! Dads! Dads, you cannot be the guy what make the rules. You got to be the one who nurtures the child as well as the mother. Mother, your turn is coming. Don't worry. I'll pick on you next time. Understand, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I make everybody mad. All right? So your time's coming. But guys, you need to nurture. That word nurture means to instruct and train. It's a positive term. Filling up your child with, again, the needs of the child. Including all those things that they will need to grow and develop to maturity, especially spiritually. That's our responsibility, to feed the child to maturity. Additionally, we feed the child with admonition. Now, that word can have a somewhat negative sense, though the word itself just means encouragement or exhortation. It's used 3 times, I find, in the New Testament. And there's 2 aspects of admonition. And it's 2 types of correction discipline. It's correction, that is, change your path. You're going in the wrong direction. And fathers, we need to be able to stand up to our children and saying, you're going wrong here, son. You're going wrong here, daughter. It's wrong. So we need to correct their path. But it also has the notion of admonition, not only of the correction, but the discipline that accompanies if they don't change their direction. Because why do we impose discipline? To show that we love them and for them to understand the consequences of disobedience. So it involves chastisement. It involves confrontation and challenge. Yeah, it can have a somewhat negative nature. But notice the balance again. Nurture the positive, admonition the correction or change. Do you know what happens if we don't apply these things to our life and to our children? Then we give a bad example. Let me give you one. Do you remember King David? Godly man, a man after God's own heart. The only thing is he had a woman problem. You know what happened? Murder, adultery. You know how he treated his sons? Did he nurture and admonish them? What happened to his son who raped his half-sister? He didn't do a thing. And what happened? As a result of that, he had a brother kill a brother. Because if you do a study on David's parenting skills, one thing you will come up with is that he was lacking, especially in the area of admonition and telling his children, don't do as I did. And here are the consequences. Instead, he let them do whatever they wanted. We can't do that, guys. We need to teach our children in a balanced perspective. Feed them, nurture them, and admonish them. Not that we're perfect, but that we're pointing to God. There's a third thing in regard to our children. We also need to protect our child. You know, I look at Jesus, what he said in John chapter 10, verse 15, where it says, the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. That is a father's responsibility to his sheep, his family, is to lay down his life, to protect them at all costs. What do we need to protect our children from? There are so many things. There's predators. There's predators seeking our children on the internet. There's predators seeking our children, yes, at schools. There's predators all about us, and it's our responsibility as the primary authority and protector to be the primary ones being conscious of those things. We need to protect our children from perversion and all the perversion that's going on in television and other places. It's our responsibility to protect our children from becoming materialistic and being consumed by possessions. It's our responsibility to protect our children from ourselves. Guys have a tendency to even hurt their own children. I was watching a video, I think it was on television, one of these funniest, things. And this guy is holding his, looks like about a 6-month-old baby. And you know how people say, "Oh, I love you so much, I could just eat you up." And he reached down and he nipped on the clothes of his kid, just kind of take a little bite. Only thing is, he took the kid's skin. So he bit the kid. And the kid goes, "Ah!" And here comes Mama Bear. Mother. What happened to my kid? And here's the dad, aghast. That he would hurt his child. He didn't mean to. And the kid's screaming because he was hurt. Dads can do that. They don't mean to. And they shouldn't. But it happens. Guys, we've even got to protect our children from ourselves because we're imperfect. Men, God has called us to be godly dads. And God's greatest call and challenge is for a man to be a godly father. I read the story. It was published by a man by the name of Jack Camer. He is considered one of the movers, the shakers in the man's rights movement. He's one of those prominent figures out of Baltimore that has done a lot to accentuate the concept of manhood and where it should be. In 1992, he was out in Palm Springs and had a weekend conference with 16, 18 other guys who are the movers and shakers in the man's movement. And I don't know the full details, but he ended up in L.A., and he was without a ride. He had his suitcase, and he was in a parking lot, a fast food parking lot, and he couldn't get a ride. He couldn't get a taxi to stop. He couldn't find a phone, all these other things. And so here he was, just having come from this conference of movers and shakers in the men's movement, needing to get to the airport to catch a ride back home. And there was no way. And so he saw these 3 Hispanic men, and he approached them for a ride. Let me read the story to you. He was running late for a plane at L.A., and he had just spent 4 days in the mountains above Palm Springs at a conference of men who wanted to give the nation new hope for old and growing problems. He says, "We were a few of the big fish in the small pond that some have called the men's movement. We agreed that what the nation most urgently needs right now is a massive infusion of strong, noble, loving, nurturing, healthy, masculine energy to counteract Americans' malaise, impotence, and social pathologies. We talked a lot about the importance of fathers both as archetypal metaphors and as a practical reality. I approached 3 young Hispanic men standing outside their car in a fast food parking lot and asked them for a ride. They looked at each other. One of them in a white t-shirt said to the one who must have been the driver, "Go for it, man." The driver hesitated. I said, "Name a price that makes it worth your while." He looked straight at me. $10, he said. "I'll give you 20. "Let's do it, man," said the t-shirted youth. The driver nodded and popped the trunk. "You want to put your suitcase here?" "No thanks," I answered straight back. The image of being forced empty-handed out of the car was clear in my mind. I'd rather keep it with me. "That's cool," the T-shirt said. So there I was, entrusting my life to what I hoped to be positive male energy. I was thinking we should go west to Lincoln Avenue. We headed east. Now what? But then we turned south, and soon we were on a freeway. I know it could have been stupid, but I took out my wallet, removed a 20, and said to the driver, "Here, I want you to pay you now." The driver took it with a simple thanks. "So here I am, guys," I said. "I sure hope you're going to take care of me." T-shirt sitting in the back seat with me, my suitcase between us, smiled and knowingly said, "It's okay, man. We're good guys." I nodded and shrugged. "I sure hope so, because if you're not, I'm in big trouble, aren't I?" They all laughed. And then T-shirt spoke up. "So where are you from?" "Baltimore," I answered. "Oh, man, it's nice back east. That's what they say, green and everything." I smiled and nodded. "Yeah, and back east, L.A. is our idea of heaven." "Nah, it's rough here, man. It's hard." T-shirt was clearly going to be the spokesman. Every issue we men's movement guys had talked about during our conference in the mountains was in this car. It was time for a reality check. "How old are you guys?" I asked. They were 16 and 17. They were all in school and had part-time jobs. T-shirt and the driver worked in a restaurant. The quiet young man riding shotgun didn't say, "Tell me about the gangs. Are there gangs in your schools?" "Man, there's gangs everywhere. It's crazy." "Are you guys in gangs?" I asked. "No way, man." "Why not?" I wondered. "Because there's no hope in it. You just get a bullet in your head." "Yeah, but what hope is there for you outside the gang?" "I don't know. I just want to get a future, do something." "What's the difference between you guys and the guys in the gangs?" "I don't know, man. We just don't want to do it." "Yeah, but why not? What's the difference?" "I don't know, man. I don't know. We're just lucky, I guess." I let the question sit for a moment, then started up. "What about fathers? Do you have a father at home?" I asked the youth in the back seat with me. "Yeah, I do." "How about you?" I asked the driver. "Yeah, I got a dad." "Living with you?" "Yeah." And the shotgun volunteered. "I got a dad too." "How about the guys in gangs? Do they have fathers living with them?" "No way, man. None of them do." "So maybe fathers make a difference," I suggested. "Absolutely, man, absolutely." "Why?" I probed. "What difference does a father make?" "He's always behind you, man, pushing you, keeping you in line." "Yeah, telling you what's what," and the driver and shotgun agreed. And I was taken safely right where I needed to go. The driver even asked me what terminal I wanted, on time, without a hitch. I met 18 amazing men at the conference in the mountains. I'm eternally grateful for their wisdom and their urge to heal the nation. But the most amazing men I met on the trip were the three youngest, Pablo, Juan, and Richard. Amazing because in spite of everything, they were trying to be good. And the men to whom I'm most grateful are the men I never met. The men to whom I'm most grateful are their fathers. It was their fathers that got me to the airport. It was their fathers who kept me safe. Men, we need to be good dads. We need to be examples to our children. We need to love their mothers. We need to love their siblings equitably. We need to make sure we don't provoke our children to rebellious wrath. We need to feed them with the nurture and admonition that they need, and to protect them from the dangers of the world. Would you join me in prayer?